Some people are destroyed by enemies, others by circumstances, bad luck, tragedy, loss. But perhaps the most painful destruction of all is self-destruction. Because there is something uniquely heartbreaking about watching someone gifted, talented, powerful, slowly ruin themselves through choices they keep repeating. Not because they lack potential, but because strength in one area often hides weakness somewhere else. And perhaps nowhere in Scripture feels more tragic than Samson. Samson. History remembers him dramatically. The strongest man alive, lion killer, warrior, legend. The man tearing gates from cities, defeating armies, breaking chains, powerful, unstoppable, almost mythical. But perhaps history remembers wrong part of story. Because Samson's greatest battle was never against enemies, never against armies, never against strength. His greatest battle lived somewhere quieter, inside impulse, inside pride, inside loneliness, inside desire. And perhaps that is what makes Samson feel painfully modern. Because many people still live exactly like him, successful externally, collapsing internally, gifted publicly, lost privately, strong where people can see, weak where nobody notices. Pause there. Because perhaps the deepest tragedy about gifted people is this: talent often hides pain. Strength often hides insecurity. Power often hides loneliness. And humans admire visible strength so much, they miss invisible weakness completely. Imagine hearing stories about Samson as child, chosen, different, special. People whispering, "He will be extraordinary." He was not ordinary boy, not ordinary future. From beginning, expectation followed him, purpose followed him, and perhaps pressure followed him too. Many gifted children understand this pain deeply. The child expected to become something great, the talented athlete, the gifted student, the child carrying family hopes, people celebrating potential constantly. Yet, secretly, nobody asking harder question, can extraordinary pressure quietly break ordinary humans? Because sometimes being different feels lonely. Sometimes special feels isolating. Sometimes strength becomes prison. And perhaps Samson understood this better than people realize. Because imagine growing up constantly hearing, "You are chosen, you are special, you are different." How does ordinary life feel after that? Psychologists understand something fascinating. Children treated as extraordinary often struggle identity deeply, especially if emotional maturity never grows alongside talent. The child learns, "My value comes from ability. My worth comes from gifting. People love what I can do. But who am I underneath strength?" Could Samson quietly wrestle identity? Perhaps. Still, power arrived early, and power changes people. Pause there. Because humans rarely handle power perfectly, especially young power, especially power arriving before wisdom. Psychologists increasingly recognize something dangerous. Competence in one area creates illusion of competence everywhere. The athlete believing relationships easy, the celebrity believing rules unnecessary, the genius ignoring emotional maturity. Humans confuse strength with wisdom constantly. Could Samson secretly believe invincibility extended beyond muscles? Very likely. Because when people survive consequences repeatedly, arrogance grows quietly. This still happens constantly today. The successful entrepreneur ignoring emotional problems, the athlete destroying relationships, the talented person sabotaging life. People whispering, "How could someone so gifted make such terrible decisions?" Because strength blinds, especially unexamined strength. And Samson feels almost impossible to stop. Enemies fail, danger fails, fear fails, Again and again, he escapes consequences, wins battles, breaks limits, survives, until perhaps somewhere inside, a dangerous belief quietly grows. Nothing can really destroy me. Pause there, because perhaps this becomes beginning of tragedy. Psychologists understand something important. Repeated success sometimes weakens self-awareness. People stop respecting danger, stop seeing patterns, stop listening to warnings, especially impulsive people, especially lonely people, especially people secretly needing validation. Could Samson crave something deeper than victory? Perhaps. Connection, maybe. Love, maybe. Belonging, maybe. Because sometimes strongest people carry deepest loneliness. This matters enormously. Many powerful people quietly struggle internally. The public strength masking private emptiness. The successful person feeling misunderstood. The admired person secretly exhausted. People seeing power, missing pain. Could Samson secretly feel isolated? Imagine being different constantly, stronger than everyone, set apart constantly, carrying expectations constantly. Who understands you? Who sees real you? Psychologists increasingly understand something painful. Isolation often creates vulnerability, especially emotional vulnerability. Lonely people sometimes make dangerous relationship choices, not because they ignore warning signs, because longing feels louder than wisdom. This matters because Samson's story never becomes strength story. It becomes relationship story. Pause there, because destruction rarely begins dramatically. Usually, it begins quietly. Patterns, choices, warnings ignored, needs misunderstood. The wrong person arriving at right emotional moment. And Samson repeatedly moves toward danger. Not accidentally, repeatedly. Desire leading, impulse deciding, wisdom fading. Many people understand this painfully. The relationship obviously unhealthy, the habit obviously destructive, the red flags everyone notices. Except person inside story. Psychologists call this emotional blindness, when unmet needs overpower judgment. Could Samson mistake desire for love? Could loneliness overpower wisdom? Could strength create dangerous overconfidence? How could it not? And perhaps nowhere becomes sadder than this truth. The strongest man alive was quietly becoming weaker in ways nobody could see. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, because perhaps greatest weakness is not visible weakness. Perhaps greatest weakness hides behind confidence, behind talent, behind strength. This still happens constantly. The celebrity collapsing privately, the leader sabotaging relationships, the gifted child growing into broken adult. People asking, how did someone so strong fall apart? Wrong question, perhaps. Better question, what invisible weakness went unnoticed too long? Because maybe Samson's story was never warning about enemies. Maybe Samson himself became greatest danger. Still, let us remain compassionate. Samson was not monster, not villain, human, gifted, impulsive, lonely perhaps. Trying to satisfy needs, strength alone could never heal. And perhaps that is why his story feels hauntingly modern. Because many people secretly fear same thing. What if my greatest strength is hiding the very weakness capable of destroying me? Tonight, we uncover one of Scripture's most tragic human stories: power, desire, loneliness, impulse, betrayal, collapse, and perhaps redemption. The warrior who defeated armies, yet struggled defeating himself, the strongest man alive, destroyed by weakest choices. Or perhaps a wounded human being learning too late that external strength cannot protect people from internal battles. This is the story of Samson. And before this story ends, you may begin wondering whether people are truly destroyed by enemies, or by the parts of themselves they refuse to face. Some children grow up ordinary, expected to live ordinary lives, ordinary pressure, ordinary expectations. But other children grow up hearing something dangerous. You are different, special, chosen, gifted, set apart. And while that sounds beautiful, perhaps few people talk honestly about the hidden burden. Because being different can feel lonely. Being gifted can feel confusing. Being special sometimes becomes heavy, especially when people celebrate potential without teaching emotional wisdom. And perhaps nowhere in Scripture feels more psychologically tragic than Samson's beginning. Because before Samson became strong, before enemies, before failure, he was simply a child born carrying extraordinary expectations. Pause there. Because expectations shape identity deeply, especially childhood expectations, especially expectations arriving before children understand themselves. Samson was not an ordinary child, even before birth. His story already felt unusual, a promise, a calling, a future people whispered about. Imagine growing up hearing stories constantly. You are chosen. You were meant for something. Your life matters differently. Can you imagine emotional weight? Children absorb expectations quickly. Psychologists understand something important. Children often become shaped not only by who they are, but by what adults expect them to become. This matters enormously, because expectations feel powerful, yet also dangerous. High expectations sometimes build confidence, but sometimes they quietly build pressure. The child feels he cannot fail. He must become something extraordinary. People need something from me. Could Samson quietly feel this burden? Perhaps more than people realize. Many gifted children understand this deeply. The talented athlete, the smart kid, the gifted artist. The child parents proudly talk about constantly. Everyone celebrates potential. Few ask, can this child emotionally carry what people expect? Because potential without emotional grounding feels dangerous. Pause there. Psychologists increasingly recognize something painful. Giftedness often creates hidden struggles, isolation, perfectionism, identity confusion, emotional loneliness. Why? Because difference changes belonging. Children different from peers often struggle feeling understood. Imagine Samson growing up, stronger, different, marked by unusual purpose, not fully like everyone else. Could ordinary relationships feel harder? Could belonging feel complicated? Likely, humans deeply need sameness, community, recognition, the feeling, people understand me. Could Samson quietly struggle this? Possibly, especially if others constantly saw role, not person. This still happens today constantly. The talented child admired, yet emotionally unseen. People love achievement, performance, potential. But who notices pressure? Who notices loneliness? Who notices fear underneath expectations? Psychologists increasingly study something fascinating. Children labeled special often feel emotionally isolated. Because identity becomes performance, the child secretly wonders, would people still care if I stopped succeeding? Would I still matter if I were ordinary? Could Samson quietly ask similar question? Maybe. Still, something else matters enormously. Power arrived early. Pause there. Because strength without maturity feels dangerous. Humans mature unevenly. Physical strength, talent, success. These things often grow faster than wisdom. Psychologists call this developmental imbalance. When external ability outpaces internal maturity, the athlete emotionally immature the celebrity lacking boundaries, the genius struggling relationships. Could Samson experience this deeply? Very likely. Imagine young man discovering extraordinary strength, enemies defeated easily, limits disappearing, consequences avoided repeatedly. How does humility survive easily? This matters enormously, because repeated success changes psychology. Humans surviving consequences repeatedly often develop dangerous confidence. Psychologists recognize something called invulnerability illusion. The belief, bad things happen to others, not me. Rules matter less for me. Consequences feel distant. Could Samson quietly develop this belief? Very likely, especially when power keeps rescuing mistakes. This still happens constantly. The talented athlete avoiding accountability, the wealthy person ignoring warning signs, the charismatic leader believing themselves untouchable. Success sometimes weakens self-awareness, and perhaps Samson faced another hidden struggle too. Loneliness. Pause there, because perhaps strongest people often feel loneliest. Think honestly. Who truly understands someone constantly seen as extraordinary? People admire, depend, project expectations. But understanding, that feels rarer. Psychologists understand something painful. Difference often creates social isolation. The child different from peers. The person carrying unusual expectations. The gifted individual feeling strangely disconnected. Could Samson secretly long for ordinary connection? Perhaps. Could loneliness partly shape future choices? Very likely. This matters because lonely people sometimes mistake attention for love, acceptance for intimacy, desire for connection. Psychologists increasingly recognize unmet emotional needs often create dangerous relationship patterns, especially for emotionally isolated people. Especially people praised for strength, but neglected emotionally. Many strong people secretly ache for softness, safety, being known. Could Samson quietly crave this? Maybe deeply. Still, special people often receive another dangerous message. You are above ordinary limits. Pause there again, because this becomes psychologically dangerous fast. Children repeatedly praised for exceptionalism sometimes struggle boundaries. Rules feel optional. Warnings feel smaller. People constantly forgive mistakes because talent feels valuable. This still happens constantly today. The gifted student excused repeatedly. The athlete protected despite behavior. The talented child never hearing healthy limits. Eventually, accountability weakens. Could Samson grow up feeling consequences rarely apply? Very possible. This matters enormously later, because patterns begin early. The impulsive adult often began as child rarely corrected meaningfully. Not because evil, because strength kept covering weakness. And Samson, strength covered many things. Immaturity, impulse, poor judgment, emotional neediness perhaps. This becomes tragedy, because humans often celebrate gifts, ignoring character. People admire visible strength, less interested in invisible wisdom. Yet wisdom matters more long-term. Psychologists increasingly emphasize emotional intelligence, self-awareness, impulse control, relationship wisdom. Without these, even gifted people struggle deeply. Could Samson become emotionally underdeveloped while physically powerful? Possibly. And perhaps this explains much later pain, because external strength cannot replace emotional maturity. This still feels hauntingly modern. The successful person emotionally fragile, the admired leader privately impulsive, the talented creator self-destructive. People asking, how could someone so gifted ruin everything? Perhaps because gifting and wisdom are not same thing. Pause there. This feels important. Talent protects people temporarily. Character protects people long-term. Samson had extraordinary gifting, but perhaps emotional growth lagged behind. Could loneliness quietly deepen? Likely. Could impulsivity grow? Certainly. Could identity become confusing? Very possible, because perhaps nobody taught harder lesson. Strength alone cannot build healthy life. Relationships require wisdom. Freedom requires discipline. Power requires self-awareness. And perhaps nowhere becomes sadder than this truth. The child born special quietly grows vulnerable in ways nobody notices. Because people celebrate visible strengths loudly, while invisible weaknesses grow silently. This still happens everywhere. The gifted teenager struggling mentally, the successful executive emotionally exhausted, the admired celebrity privately collapsing. People see power, miss fragility. Could Samson secretly feel fragile emotionally? Maybe more than history remembers. Still, let us remain compassionate. Samson was human, young, gifted, trying to understand identity under impossible expectations, like many people today, trying to figure out who they are beneath labels, beneath pressure, beneath performance. And perhaps Samson whispers something hauntingly relevant. Being gifted does not make people immune to struggle. Sometimes, being gifted creates struggle, because special people often feel lonely. Pressure feels heavy. Temptation feels louder. And strength sometimes becomes hiding place for pain nobody else sees. Because somewhere ahead, relationships wait. Temptation waits. Danger waits. And Samson, the child born different, will soon discover painful truth. The strongest people are sometimes the least prepared for the battles nobody else can see. Before Samson became legend, before betrayal, before collapse, before history remembered his strength, he was simply a man trying to understand who he was beneath power. Nobody else seemed to fully understand. And perhaps that matters more than people realize, because people are rarely destroyed only by bad decisions. Often, people are shaped quietly long before collapse begins. Inside identity, inside loneliness, inside unmet needs, inside emotional wounds nobody notices because visible talent feels louder. And perhaps nowhere in Scripture feels more psychologically tragic than Samson himself. Because Samson was many things at once: gifted, impulsive, confident, lonely, strong, yet strangely vulnerable, admired, yet isolated. And perhaps that contradiction shaped everything. To understand Samson, we must first understand something uncomfortable. Power changes identity, especially early power. Especially power arriving before emotional maturity. Psychologists understand something fascinating. Humans developing unusual ability early often struggle emotionally later. Why? Because life stops feeling ordinary. People treat them differently. Expectations shift. Boundaries blur. Could Samson experience this deeply? Very likely. Imagine growing up constantly hearing stories about yourself. Chosen, special, different, set apart, strong. People expecting greatness before you even understand yourself. How does ordinary identity survive? Many gifted children quietly struggle here. The athlete everyone depends on. The talented child everyone praises. The gifted student expected to succeed constantly. People celebrate ability, but rarely ask, who is this person underneath performance? Could Samson secretly struggle knowing himself? Perhaps, because strength became identity quickly. Pause there. Identity matters enormously. Psychologists increasingly recognize something painful. When ability becomes identity, people often struggle self-awareness, the athlete becoming only athlete, the genius becoming only intellect, the performer becoming only performance. Could Samson begin believing, my value comes from strength, Very possible. And if strength becomes identity, what happens emotionally? People stop developing other areas. Relationships, patience, impulse control, emotional regulation. Could Samson grow physically powerful while emotionally immature? How could he not? This still happens constantly today. The gifted athlete struggling relationships. The successful entrepreneur emotionally reckless. The celebrity admired publicly, yet privately lost. Talent often matures faster than wisdom. Samson feels painfully modern, exactly here. Still, strength alone never explains person, because perhaps Samson carried another hidden truth: loneliness. Pause there, because maybe loneliness shaped Samson more than strength ever did. Imagine honestly, who fully understands someone, constantly seen as different, stronger, set apart, expected to become extraordinary. People admire power, but admiration and understanding are not same thing. Psychologists understand something painful. Difference often creates isolation, especially emotional isolation. The child feeling misunderstood, the gifted person feeling separate, the strong person nobody checks on emotionally. Could Samson quietly feel like outsider? Very likely. Many strong people secretly understand this feeling, everyone needing something from them, few asking how they actually feel, everyone admiring image, few understanding person. Could Samson secretly long for closeness, connection, being understood, perhaps deeply? This matters enormously, because lonely people often make dangerous relationship choices. Not because stupid, because longing grows louder than wisdom. Psychologists increasingly recognize emotional hunger clouds judgment, especially when unmet for years. Could Samson mistake desire for connection? Likely. Still, another trait appears repeatedly: impulse. Pause there, because Samson feels impulsive almost immediately. Strong feelings, fast decisions, quick reactions, little patience. Psychologists understand something important. Impulsivity often hides emotional immaturity, especially among gifted people, especially among people rarely facing consequences early. Remember, Samson often escaped consequences. Enemies failed, danger failed, strength kept, recusing mistakes. Repeated rescue creates dangerous psychology. Humans surviving consequences repeatedly begin believing, nothing bad really happens to me. This becomes critical, because repeated success often weakens caution. Could Samson secretly feel untouchable? Very likely. This still happens everywhere. The talented athlete ignoring warning signs, the wealthy person believing rules optional, the charismatic leader overestimating invincibility. People surviving consequences stop fearing consequences, until suddenly, consequences finally arrive. Still, Samson feels emotionally reactive too. Pause there again, because reactions reveal deeper things. Anger appears quickly. Desire appears quickly. Emotion drives decisions repeatedly. Psychologists increasingly recognize something important. People struggling emotional regulation often react intensely, especially lonely people, especially misunderstood people, especially people carrying identity confusion. Could Samson quietly struggle emotional stability? Possibly. Strength outside, chaos inside. Many powerful people secretly live here, confident externally, restless internally, successful publicly, emotionally confused privately. Could Samson secretly feel misunderstood constantly? Imagine being different everywhere, people expecting strength constantly, purpose constantly, greatness constantly. Perhaps somewhere inside, normal connection feels impossible. Psychologists understand something painful. People Feeling emotionally unseen, often search desperately for validation. Attention feels intoxicating. Romance feels consuming. Acceptance feels irresistible. Could Samson become vulnerable exactly here? Almost certainly, because loneliness changes judgment. Many adults secretly understand this too. The obvious red flags ignored, the unhealthy relationship chosen, the attention mistaken for intimacy. People later ask, "How did I not see this?" Perhaps because loneliness felt louder than logic. This becomes Samson's tragedy. Still, let us remain fair. Samson was not simply reckless, he was gifted too. Pause there, because giftedness matters. Samson repeatedly accomplishes extraordinary things: bravery, action, leadership moments, protection, power used meaningfully at times. Could Samson genuinely care about people? Likely. Could he desire purpose? Certainly. Humans remain complicated, especially wounded humans, especially lonely humans. People are rarely one thing. Samson was not villain, nor flawless hero, just painfully human, strong, yet struggling, chosen, yet confused, gifted, yet vulnerable. Psychologists increasingly emphasize something important. Humans often carry contradictory truths simultaneously. The loving parent still emotionally unavailable, the successful leader still insecure, the gifted person still lonely, the strong person still fragile. Could Samson feel deeply insecure despite enormous power? Possibly, because insecurity rarely disappears through talent. Sometimes talent hides insecurity. This feels hauntingly modern. The muscular man, privately insecure. The celebrity craving approval. The successful executive, secretly lonely. The admired person, privately exhausted. People see image, miss hunger underneath. Could Samson secretly hunger for belonging? Perhaps desperately. And perhaps nowhere becomes sadder than this truth. The strongest man alive may have quietly spent much of life feeling emotionally weak. Not weak physically, weak against loneliness, weak against impulse, weak against need for connection. Because humans often survive visible battles while quietly losing invisible ones. This matters deeply. Modern people still fight same wars: addiction, loneliness, relationship chaos, impulse, self-sabotage. People outwardly successful, yet inwardly struggling. Samson feels hauntingly relevant because he mirrors painful truth. People strongest externally are not always strongest internally. Still, something deeper lingers too: purpose. Pause there, because despite confusion, despite weakness, despite mistakes, something meaningful still followed Samson. Could gifted people still matter despite flaws? Perhaps. Could broken people still carry purpose? Certainly, but purpose does not remove consequences. This matters enormously. Because somewhere ahead, desire waits, temptation waits, warnings wait, and Samson, the gifted outsider searching perhaps for something strength could never provide, will soon face dangerous truth. The battles most capable of destroying people rarely begin outside them. Sometimes, the most dangerous enemy feels strangely familiar. Because it lives inside desire nobody fully understands yet. Most people imagine destruction arriving dramatically. A disaster, a betrayal, a sudden collapse. Something obvious, something loud, something impossible to miss. But perhaps the most dangerous things in life arrive quietly, slowly, disguised as desire, excitement, chemistry, the feeling. You know this may not be wise, but I want it anyway. Because perhaps no force confuses human judgment more powerfully than longing, especially lonely longing, especially emotional hunger, mistaken for love. And perhaps nowhere in Scripture feels more psychologically modern than Samson's relationships. Because Samson's downfall did not begin with weakness. It began with desire. Pause there. Desire. Something deeply human, deeply ordinary, and deeply dangerous when left unquestioned. Because desire itself is not enemy. Humans need connection, love, attraction, belonging. The need to feel chosen, wanted, seen. Nothing wrong there. The problem begins when emotional hunger becomes louder than wisdom, and perhaps Samson understood this painfully. Imagine Samson emotionally. Strong, different, set apart, misunderstood perhaps, admired, yet lonely. Pause there, because loneliness changes decision-making more than people realize. Psychologists increasingly recognize something important. Loneliness alters judgment, especially relational judgment. The brain begins prioritizing connection over caution. People ignore warning signs, minimize danger, rationalize obvious problems. Why? Because unmet emotional needs feel powerful. The lonely person often hears different logic. Maybe this time someone finally sees me. Could Samson secretly crave connection more deeply than strength ever revealed? Perhaps. Because strength rarely cures loneliness. Success rarely cures loneliness. Attention rarely cures loneliness. Many powerful people secretly understand this pain. Admired, yet emotionally unseen. Desired, yet not truly known. Could Samson quietly ache for intimacy? Very likely. And perhaps this explains something important. He repeatedly moves toward relationships obviously dangerous. Pause there. Because patterns matter. Psychologists study patterns carefully. Repeated choices often reveal hidden emotional needs. Samson repeatedly chooses complicated relationships, painful relationships, dangerous relationships. Why? Many people ask this question constantly today. Why do intelligent people choose unhealthy relationships? Why ignore obvious warning signs? Why stay when everyone sees danger? Psychologists offer painful answer. Because humans rarely choose relationships logically, they choose emotionally. And emotional hunger distorts logic. Could Samson mistake intensity for intimacy? How could he not? This still happens constantly. The toxic relationship feeling exciting. The emotionally unavailable partner feeling irresistible. The obvious red flags ignored because chemistry feels strong. People later ask, why did not I see it? Truth. Often they saw it. They just hoped love or desire would somehow change reality. Samson feels hauntingly human here, because perhaps he repeatedly confuses wanting someone with someone being safe. Pause there. Again, safety matters. Psychologists increasingly emphasize this. Healthy relationships feel emotionally safe, predictable, respectful, honest. Yet many lonely people unconsciously pursue intensity instead. Drama, danger, uncertainty. Why? Because chaos sometimes feels familiar, especially people growing up emotionally misunderstood, especially people carrying unmet needs. Could Samson unconsciously chase relationships reflecting inner chaos? Possibly. Humans often recreate emotional patterns unconsciously. The emotionally neglected person chasing unavailable partners. The insecure person chasing validation. The lonely person mistaking attention for love. Could Samson simply want someone finally choosing him? Perhaps deeply. Still, there is another danger. Power. Pause there. Because powerful people often struggle relationships differently. Psychologists increasingly recognize something painful. Power creates illusion of control. People begin believing He You know what I am doing. Consequences do not apply same way. Could Samson secretly think, I'm strong enough to manage this? Very likely. Many gifted people quietly believe same thing. The successful person ignoring relationship advice. The talented person assuming they can control bad situations. The charismatic leader overestimating emotional resilience. Strength creates blind spots. This matters enormously, because people surviving consequences repeatedly stop fearing consequences, and Samson repeatedly survives, escapes danger, wins battles, overcomes problems. Eventually, a dangerous belief quietly forms. Nothing can really break me. Pause there. This belief destroys many people. The addict believing control still exists. The entrepreneur overextending recklessly. The celebrity ignoring boundaries. The strong person secretly underestimating weakness. Psychologists call this invulnerability bias. The illusion. I am exception. Danger affects others. Not me. Could Samson carry this illusion? Absolutely. Still, relationships reveal something deeper too. Identity wounds. Pause there. Because people often seek partners unconsciously answering painful questions. Am I lovable? Am I enough? Will someone finally stay? Could Samson secretly ask these questions? Imagine emotional contradiction. Strongest man alive, still emotionally uncertain, powerful externally, still longing internally. Many people secretly understand this. The successful adult craving reassurance. The admired person secretly insecure. The strong friend privately lonely. Humans rarely outgrow emotional hunger. And perhaps nowhere becomes more dangerous than when emotional hunger meets manipulation. Because manipulative relationships rarely begin obviously. Psychologists understand this deeply. Toxic relationships usually start beautifully. Attention, validation, excitement, feeling chosen, seen, special. The person finally making loneliness feel quieter. Could Samson become vulnerable? Here. How could he not? Especially lonely people often ignore red flags longest, because losing connection feels more frightening than tolerating danger. This still happens constantly. Friends warning someone repeatedly. Family seeing obvious dysfunction. Everyone noticing. Except person inside relationship. Why? Because emotional attachment changes perception. Psychologists call this attachment blindness. The brain minimizing danger to preserve emotional bond. Could Samson ignore warning signs repeatedly? Likely. Still, something haunting about Samson remains. He keeps moving toward danger, repeatedly. Pause there. Because perhaps deepest tragedy about self-destruction is repetition. Humans rarely collapse from one mistake. Patterns collapse people. Repeated avoidance, repeated impulse, repeated denial, repeated hope. Could Samson know danger existed? Maybe. Could loneliness feel louder anyway? Likely. This feels painfully modern. The person texting obvious red flag again. Returning to unhealthy relationship again. Ignoring gut instinct again. People asking, why do I keep doing this? Psychologists increasingly recognize something painful. Unmet emotional needs overpower logic surprisingly often, especially loneliness, especially insecurity, especially longing for love. Still, let us remain compassionate. Samson was human, not foolish monster. Human, wanting intimacy, wanting connection, wanting something strength alone never gave. Perhaps people judged him too quickly, because many secretly carry same vulnerability. The successful person lonely at night, the admired person privately aching, the strong person longing for softness. This matters, because weakness often hides beneath strength, and perhaps Samson whispers uncomfortable truth to humanity. People rarely destroy themselves because they are weak. Sometimes, people destroy themselves because the thing they want most quietly blinds them to the thing hurting them most. And somewhere ahead, one relationship waits, one betrayal waits, one devastating collapse waits. Because Samson, the strongest man alive, is about to discover terrifying truth. The people most capable of hurting us are often the people we wanted most to trust. Some tragedies happen suddenly. A crash, a loss, a disaster nobody expected. But other tragedies unfold slowly, painfully, like watching someone ignore warning signs until consequences finally arrive. And perhaps nowhere in Scripture feels more heartbreaking, more painfully human than Samson and Delilah. Because this story was never simply about betrayal. It was about blindness, emotional blindness, the kind happening when desire grows louder than wisdom, the kind happening when loneliness quietly overpowers caution, and perhaps most tragically, the kind happening when someone slowly becomes vulnerable to the very thing they refuse to face. Pause there, because before collapse, there were warnings, many warnings, repeated warnings. And perhaps that matters enormously, because humans rarely fall without signs first. Psychologists understand something important. Major self-destruction often happens gradually. Small compromises, repeated denial, ignored instincts, the quiet voice saying, "Something feels wrong here," and choosing not to listen. Could Samson feel warning signs? Perhaps. Yet something stronger kept pulling him back. Need, desire, hope, loneliness. Imagine Samson emotionally strong, admired, yet secretly vulnerable. And then someone arrives. Delilah. Pause there, because perhaps Delilah matters psychologically more than people realize. Many people imagine villain immediately, manipulator, enemy, trap, maybe, but relationships rarely feel dangerous in beginning. Psychologists understand this deeply. Unhealthy relationships often begin through emotional fulfillment. The feeling, finally someone sees me. Finally someone chooses me. Finally loneliness quiets. Could Delilah feel comforting to Samson initially? Likely, especially if emotional hunger already existed. This matters enormously, because lonely people often mistake relief for safety. Pause there again. Safety and relief are not same thing. Something easing loneliness does not automatically mean healthy. Something exciting does not automatically mean trustworthy. Many adults painfully learn this too late. The relationship feeling magical early, then confusing later, then exhausting later, then damaging later. Could Samson quietly ignore warning signs because emotional need felt stronger? Very likely. Psychologists call this emotional override. When emotional attachment begins overpowering rational judgment, humans stop seeing clearly. Friends notice problems. Family notices problems. Everyone notices, except person inside story. Why? Because attachment changes perception. The brain protects connection, even unhealthy connection. This still happens constantly. The toxic relationship everyone warns about. The partner repeatedly breaking trust. The obvious manipulation excused again and again. People asking, why stay? Truth. Because emotional hunger complicates logic. Could Samson stay partly because loneliness scared him more than danger? Perhaps. Still, the warning signs grow louder. Pause there. Because Delilah repeatedly asks same dangerous question. The source of strength. Again, again, again. Can you imagine? Psychologists increasingly recognize something fascinating. Healthy trust feels gradual. Manipulation feels repetitive. Pressure, boundary testing, persistence. Could Samson notice something strange? Surely. And yet, he stays. Why? This question matters deeply, because many intelligent people ignore obvious red flags. Not because stupid, because humans rationalize danger when attachment grows strong. The mind whispers, she does not mean harm. Maybe I am overthinking. Maybe this time different? Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, when reality and emotional desire conflict. Humans often distort reality. Could Samson secretly know something felt wrong? Possibly. Could hope feel louder anyway? Likely. This feels painfully modern. The repeated lying excused, the disrespect minimized, the manipulation justified. People staying because leaving feels lonelier. Could Samson fear loneliness more than betrayal? Perhaps. Still, eventually, something breaks. Pause there again. Because collapse rarely begins where people think. People assume Samson collapsed when haircut, but perhaps collapse began much earlier. Inside repeated compromise, repeated denial, repeated overconfidence, repeated emotional blindness. Psychologists increasingly understand. Big collapses usually begin long before consequences arrive visibly. The addiction beginning quietly, the marriage collapsing slowly, the burnout building silently, the betrayal becoming possible through ignored warning signs. Could Samson already be collapsing emotionally before physical fall? Very possible. Still, the moment arrives. Samson finally tells truth. Pause there. Why? Why trust someone repeatedly proving unsafe? Psychologists understand something painful. Lonely people sometimes overshare with unsafe people. Why? Because emotional closeness feels intoxicating. Being understood feels healing. The desire to finally trust overwhelms caution. Could Samson desperately want intimacy? Maybe deeply. Could trust feel irresistible? Certainly, humans deeply long to be known. Even when unsafe, this still happens constantly. The person revealing vulnerabilities too quickly, trusting wrong people, giving emotional access before safety earned. Not foolishness, human longing. Could Samson simply want someone finally staying? Perhaps. And then, the betrayal. Pause there. Because betrayal hurts differently, especially chosen betrayal, especially trusted betrayal. Psychologists recognize betrayal trauma as uniquely painful. The people closest often wound deepest. Why? Because trust lowers defenses. The place expected safety suddenly becomes danger. Can you imagine Samson waking, confused, disoriented, something wrong? Strength gone. Pause there again. Gone. For first time, power disappears. The thing defining identity. The thing protecting vulnerability. The thing making him feel untouchable. Gone. Imagine emotional collapse. Psychologists increasingly recognize something devastating. Identity crises intensify when core strengths disappear. The athlete after injury, the executive after job loss, the attractive person after aging, the admired person after failure. Humans often build identity around strongest trait. Could Samson quietly think, who am I now? This becomes heartbreaking, because strength covered deeper struggles. Loneliness, insecurity, impulsivity, need for validation. And suddenly, nothing protects him anymore. Still, the story grows darker. Blindness. Pause there. literal blindness, yet perhaps symbolic too, because maybe Samson had been blind long before eyes disappeared. Blind to warning signs, blind to patterns, blind to weakness, blind to loneliness shaping choices. This feels hauntingly human. Psychologists increasingly recognize emotional blindness, the inability to see ourselves clearly, especially our patterns, especially our vulnerabilities. Humans often recognize weakness in others easier than themselves. Could Samson fail seeing himself honestly? How could he not? Many people secretly live here too. Successful externally, collapsing internally, ignoring emotional wounds, avoiding loneliness, repeating same patterns until consequences finally force awareness. Still, let us remain compassionate, because collapse feels humiliating. Public failure, loss, consequences. Many adults secretly know this pain. The divorce, the addiction exposed, the career collapse, the betrayal, the moment everyone suddenly sees weakness. Psychologists understand shame deeply. Shame whispers, "You ruined everything. You are failure." Nothing meaningful remains. Could Samson feel crushed? Absolutely. Still, something haunting remains. The strongest man alive, now weak, humiliated, broken. Can you imagine emotional grief? The memories, the regret, the replaying mistakes endlessly. Why did not I listen? Why did not I stop? Why did I ignore warnings? Many people understand this pain intimately. The hindsight after collapse. Psychologists call this retrospective clarity. After consequences, everything suddenly feels obvious, painfully obvious. Still, perhaps deepest tragedy is this. Samson was not destroyed instantly. He was destroyed slowly by patterns, needs, blindness, choices. This matters enormously, because most self-destruction still works same way today. Not dramatic collapse first, quiet compromises first, ignored boundaries first, loneliness first, overconfidence first. Humans rarely fall in single moment. They drift until suddenly everything changes. And perhaps Samson leaves humanity one haunting question. What weakness are you most convinced you control, while it quietly controls more of you than you realize? Because somewhere inside darkness, something still survives. Regret, reflection, maybe even redemption. And Samson, broken at last, will soon discover terrifying truth. Sometimes people finally see clearly only after losing the thing they trusted too much. History loves certainty, heroes, villains, people easy to admire, people easy to reject. Simple stories feel emotionally comfortable, but real human beings, especially broken human beings, rarely fit clean categories. And perhaps nowhere in Scripture feels more uncomfortable, more fascinating than Samson. Because depending on who tells story, Samson becomes two completely different men. To some, he is hero, chosen by God, a warrior of faith, a judge defending Israel, a man remembered among great figures of faith, strong, courageous, set apart. But to others, Samson feels more like warning, impulsive, reckless, emotionally immature. A gifted man repeatedly sabotaging himself, the strongest man alive, destroyed by weakness he refused to face. And perhaps the real controversy begins here. Was Samson a faithful hero or tragic warning story? Pause there, because honest conversations require complexity, especially biblical conversations, especially stories involving failure. Humans naturally prefer extremes: perfect hero, total failure. Psychologists understand this deeply. The brain prefers certainty. Simple categories feel safe, yet real humans feel complicated. And Samson may be one of Scripture's most painfully human contradictions. Could he be chosen? And deeply flawed, faithful at moments, and destructive at others. Strong, yet emotionally fragile, perhaps all at once. Let us begin honestly. Samson repeatedly makes terrible decisions. Pause there. We should not romanticize this. Relationships full of red flags, impulse, anger, recklessness, ignoring wisdom repeatedly. Many people reading Samson quietly ask, how could someone so gifted be so careless? Fair question. Psychologists increasingly recognize something painful. Giftedness does not equal maturity. Strength does not equal wisdom. Success does not equal emotional health. Could Samson remain emotionally immature despite incredible power? Very likely. This still happens constantly, today. The brilliant entrepreneur sabotaging relationships, the gifted athlete struggling self-control, the charismatic leader privately chaotic. Humans often mature unevenly. Could Samson feel emotionally younger than his strength suggested? Possibly. Still, something else feels important. Loneliness. Pause there again, because lonely people often make confusing decisions. Humans longing deeply for connection sometimes tolerate unhealthy situations, ignore obvious warning signs, trust unsafe people, not because foolish, because unmet needs feel powerful. Could Samson repeatedly choose badly, partly because loneliness shaped judgment? Perhaps. Psychologists increasingly recognize emotional deprivation patterns. The starving heart often accepts unhealthy nourishment. This matters enormously, because maybe Samson's mistakes feel tragically human, not simply foolish. Still, critics ask harder question. If Samson repeatedly failed, why? Remember him as person of faith. Pause there, because this feels uncomfortable. Modern people often assume faithfulness means consistency. No major failure. Good choices constantly. Strong morality constantly. Yet Scripture repeatedly complicates this. Broken people still matter. Imperfect people still appear. People failing spectacularly, yet somehow not fully abandoned. Could Samson's inclusion among faithful figures feel strange? Absolutely. Many readers struggle here. Psychologists understand something fascinating. Humans deeply struggle moral complexity. We prefer deserving heroes, earned redemption, clear virtue. Yet life rarely works cleanly. People fail badly, still love deeply. People hurt others, still long for meaning. People sabotage themselves, still carry something valuable. Could Samson genuinely care about purpose despite repeated mistakes? Possibly. Humans often contain contradiction. This feels deeply important, because many people secretly fear, if I fail badly enough, maybe nothing meaningful remains. Samson quietly challenges that fear. Still, we must remain honest. Consequences mattered. Pause there, because grace without consequence becomes fantasy. Samson suffered deeply. Humiliation, blindness, collapse, loss, regret. Psychologists understand something painful. Consequences often teach what pride refuses learning. Especially gifted people, especially people feeling untouchable. Could Samson finally understand weakness after collapse? Perhaps for first time. This matters enormously, because sometimes brokenness reveals truth, strength hid. Humans often see themselves clearly only after falling. Many adults secretly understand this. The addiction finally faced, the marriage collapse, forcing reflection, the burnout exposing unhealthy patterns, people whispering painfully, "I wish I had listened sooner." Could Samson feel devastating regret? How could he not? Still, here comes harder controversy. Was Samson selfish? Pause there again. Fair question. Many moments feel self-focused, impulsive, emotionally reactive, driven by desire. Could Samson repeatedly prioritize himself? Certainly, yet perhaps something changes near end. Psychologists increasingly recognize something important. People sometimes grow emotionally through suffering, pain revealing deeper truths, collapsed exposing illusion. Could prison become mirror for Samson? No distractions, no strength, no image, just reality. Who am I now? Could regret deepen? Reflection? Perhaps. This matters because final Samson feels different somehow. Less arrogant, less invincible, more aware, more humble perhaps, still broken, but clearer. And perhaps this raises an uncomfortable question modern people rarely ask. Can people change after failure? Pause there. Because society loves punishment, labels, permanent judgment. Yet psychology increasingly suggests humans remain capable of transformation. Not always, but sometimes, especially after consequences, especially after humility. Could Samson finally face himself honestly? Possibly. Still, some readers argue Samson remains cautionary tale only. And perhaps partly true, psychologists increasingly emphasize warning stories matter. Humans learn through consequences witnessed in others. Samson warns against impulse, overconfidence, ignoring red flags, unhealed loneliness, mistaking desire for love, strength without wisdom. Could Samson absolutely function as warning? Story. Certainly, many people desperately need this warning, especially gifted people, especially successful people, especially lonely people. Still, perhaps stopping there misses something deeper, because warning alone feels incomplete. Pause there. Why? Because final Samson matters. The man broken, humiliated, powerless, still somehow reaching upward again. This feels deeply human, because many adults know failure intimately. The divorce, the addiction, the betrayal, the career collapse, the shame, the moment thinking, maybe I ruined everything. Could Samson speak quietly to broken people here? Perhaps powerfully, because maybe deepest truth is this: failure does not erase humanity. Failure does not automatically erase purpose. Failure hurts. Consequences remain. Yet meaning sometimes survives collapse. This feels painfully hopeful. Psychologists increasingly recognize post-traumatic growth, pain producing reflection, humility, wisdom, awareness. Could Samson become more human after losing strength? Maybe. Could brokenness reveal what strength concealed? Possibly. This complicates everything. Because perhaps Samson was neither pure hero, nor pure warning. Perhaps he was something more uncomfortable. Human, gifted, lonely, impulsive, broken, trying, failing, still somehow reaching towards something meaningful. Could this make him relatable? Painfully relatable. Because modern people secretly fear same contradiction. Strong in some areas, weak in others. Successful publicly, struggling privately. People asking, can deeply flawed people still matter? Samson whispers uncomfortable answer. Maybe, but not without cost. And perhaps Samson leaves humanity one haunting question. Are your greatest strengths quietly hiding weaknesses strong enough to undo everything if left unexamined too long? Because perhaps the strongest warning was never Samson's collapse itself. Perhaps the warning was how long he believed collapse could never happen to him. What if Samson lived today, not carrying gates from cities, not fighting armies, not standing inside ancient battles, but here, now, inside modern loneliness, modern temptation, modern pressure. Would we recognize him? Or would he simply look like someone wildly successful, quietly falling apart? Because perhaps the uncomfortable truth is this: the modern world is full of Samsons, gifted people, powerful people, talented people, people admired publicly, while privately losing battles nobody fully sees. Because maybe Samson never disappeared. Maybe he simply changed clothes, changed language, changed distractions. But the weakness stayed painfully familiar. Imagine modern Samson growing up, different, gifted. The kid everybody notices, athletic, charismatic, confident, naturally talented. Teachers admire him. Friends admire him. People whisper, he is going to be something special. Pause there, because gifted children experience something strange. Expectation, pressure, identity confusion. Psychologists increasingly recognize something important. Children praised mostly for talent often confuse performance with worth. The athlete feeling valuable only when winning. The gifted student feeling loved only when succeeding. The attractive person learning identity through admiration. Could modern Samson grow up believing, my value comes from what I can do? Very likely. This matters enormously later, because gifted people often struggle emotional maturity quietly. Not because bad, because talent protects them from consequences. Pause there again. Consequences matter. Humans grow partly through boundaries, correction, failure. But gifted people sometimes escape consequences repeatedly. The star athlete excused, the charismatic kid forgiven, the talented person constantly rescued. Psychologists call this developmental imbalance. External success growing faster than emotional maturity. Could Samson become adult, physically impressive, yet emotionally underdeveloped? Absolutely. This still happens constantly. The successful entrepreneur emotionally reckless. The celebrity sabotaging relationships. The athlete privately lonely. The admired person quietly immature. Still, modern Samson would likely struggle something huge: ego. Pause there, because ego sounds arrogant. Yet psychology sees something deeper. Often, huge ego hides insecurity. The loud confidence covering fragile identity. Could modern Samson appear confident externally, while privately needing validation constantly? Very likely. Many strong people secretly live here. The successful businessman craving approval. The influencer obsessed with attention. The powerful person terrified of irrelevance. Psychologists increasingly recognize narcissistic defenses often emerge from insecurity. Not always arrogance. Sometimes fear. Fear of not mattering. Could Samson secretly fear ordinary life? Perhaps. Because once identity attaches to giftedness, being average feels terrifying. This matters enormously. Because ego often creates blind spots. People stop listening, stop reflecting, stop questioning themselves. Could Samson believe, I am different, rules do not apply same way? Very likely. This still happens constantly. The wealthy person believing consequences optional. The celebrity feeling untouchable. The talented athlete assuming self-destruction impossible. Psychologists call this invulnerability illusion. Repeated success quietly convinces people, bad things happen to others, not me. Could modern Samson feel untouchable? Absolutely. Still, perhaps biggest struggle today would not be strength. It would be addiction. Pause there. Not necessarily drugs, though maybe. Addiction appears many ways. Validation addiction. Attention addiction. Pornography. Sex. Alcohol. Work. Status. Risk. Psychologists increasingly recognize something important. Addiction often grows from emotional emptiness, loneliness, pain, unmet needs. Humans rarely become addicted simply because pleasure feels good. Often, people try escaping something painful. Could Samson secretly carry emotional loneliness? Very likely. Remember, strength rarely cures loneliness. Success rarely cures loneliness. Admiration rarely cures loneliness. Many powerful people secretly ache deeply. The celebrity surrounded by people, still lonely. The athlete admired, still emotionally unseen. The executive, successful, still empty. Could Samson secretly long to feel loved beyond gifting? Perhaps desperately. This matters because loneliness often fuels bad relationships. Pause there again. Modern Samson would likely struggle relationships intensely. The chemistry feeling overwhelming. The obvious red flags ignored. Repeated toxic cycles. Why? Psychologists increasingly recognize lonely people often mistake attention for intimacy, excitement for love, intensity for safety. Could Samson repeatedly date emotionally unhealthy people? How could he not? This still happens constantly. The successful person repeatedly choosing chaos. Friends warning repeatedly. Family concerned repeatedly. Everyone seeing danger. Except person inside story. Why? Because emotional hunger clouds judgment. Psychologists call this attachment blindness. The brain protecting emotional bond, even unsafe bond. Could Samson stay too long in toxic relationship? Absolutely. Could he mistake desire for love? Repeatedly. Likely. Many adults secretly understand this pain. The relationship obviously unhealthy, yet impossible to leave. Why? Because loneliness feels heavier than dysfunction. Still, another huge struggle today. Self-destruction. Pause there. Because perhaps Samson's deepest modern relevance lives here. People often destroy themselves quietly. Not dramatic collapse immediately. Slow collapse. Patterns. Choices. Avoidance. Psychologists understand something painful. Self-destruction usually feels comforting first. The habit reducing pain temporarily. The relationship easing loneliness temporarily. The ego protecting insecurity temporarily. Temporary relief. Long-term damage. Could modern Samson repeatedly sabotage himself? Very likely. The athlete ruining career. The celebrity burning relationships. The entrepreneur losing everything through impulse. People asking, how could someone with everything lose so much? Perhaps because success does not heal wounds. This matters enormously. Modern culture worships external success, money, status, attention, followers, beauty, power. Yet psychology increasingly confirms internal wounds remain internal wounds. Success changes environment, not automatically identity. Could Samson secretly hate vulnerability? Likely, many strong people do. Why? Because vulnerability feels dangerous, especially people admired for power. Could Samson avoid therapy? Avoid reflection? Avoid accountability? Possibly. Many gifted people struggle this. The belief, I will handle it myself. I do not need help. Meanwhile, patterns worsen. Still, perhaps biggest modern struggle would be burnout after collapse. Pause there, because eventually, consequences arrive. The addiction exposed, relationship destroyed, career damaged, public embarrassment. The moment gifted person suddenly faces weakness honestly, could Samson collapse emotionally? Absolutely. Psychologists understand shame deeply. Shame whispers, you ruined everything. You are a failure. Nothing meaningful remains. Many adults secretly know this pain. The divorce, the relapse, the scandal, the lost years, the moment wondering, did I destroy my own life? Could Samson ask same question? Certainly, yet perhaps hope survives too, because broken people still change sometimes. Psychologists increasingly emphasize post-collapse growth, pain forcing honesty, failure forcing reflection, humility creating transformation. Could modern Samson finally face loneliness? Underneath ego, perhaps. Could collapse reveal truth, success hid? Very likely. This matters deeply, because many people secretly fear, if I fail badly enough, nothing good remains. Samson quietly challenges that fear. Failure hurts. Consequences remain. Yet humanity survives. Purpose sometimes survives too. And perhaps Samson whispers something painfully relevant to modern people. The thing destroying you may not be obvious weakness. Sometimes, the thing destroying people feels strangely comforting. Attention, validation, pleasure, ego. The very thing helping pain feel quieter temporarily. And perhaps Samson leaves modern humanity with one haunting question. What are you repeatedly calling freedom, while it quietly controls more of your life than you want to admit? Because sometimes the strongest chains are invisible, and often, people notice them only after freedom already feels far away. People admire strength, always have. Physical strength, mental strength, talent, confidence, power, success. Humans naturally move toward people who look unstoppable. The athlete, the leader, the genius, the person walking into a room carrying certainty. Because strength feels safe. Strength feels impressive. Strength feels admirable. But perhaps one of the oldest warnings in human history sounds quieter than most people expect. Strength alone is never enough. And perhaps nowhere in Scripture proves this more painfully than Samson. Because Samson had almost everything people admire. Power, talent, influence, potential, a future bigger than most people could imagine. And yet, something still collapsed. Pause there, because perhaps this becomes deeply uncomfortable. Humans often assume biggest problems come from weakness. Too little talent, too little confidence, too little opportunity. But what if some of life's greatest dangers come from strength itself? Psychologists increasingly recognize something fascinating. Strength often creates blind spots. The talented person ignoring advice. The successful person avoiding accountability. The attractive person mistaking attention for love. The wealthy person believing consequences optional. Humans repeatedly confuse ability with wisdom. Could Samson make this mistake? Almost constantly. Because strength solves many problems. Until suddenly, it cannot solve most important ones. Pause there again. Strength can defeat enemies, but cannot automatically heal loneliness. Strength can build success, but cannot automatically build character. Strength can create admiration, but cannot automatically create healthy relationships. This matters enormously, because many people secretly believe, if I become successful enough, powerful enough, attractive enough, life finally works. Yet psychology increasingly confirms, external strength rarely fixes internal wounds. Could Samson secretly carry emotional emptiness despite incredible power? Very likely. Many powerful people still do. The celebrity surrounded by people, still lonely. The executive admired publicly, still insecure. The athlete worshipped, still emotionally lost. Humans often overestimate what talent can heal. Samson feels painfully relevant exactly here. Because perhaps Samson's greatest weakness was never physical. It was wisdom. Pause there. Wisdom feels underrated today. Modern culture celebrates speed, confidence, big personalities, quick success. Yet wisdom feels quieter. Reflection, self-awareness, boundaries, humility. Psychologists increasingly recognize something important. Self-awareness protects people more than talent often does. The ability to ask, why do I keep repeating this? What am I avoiding? What weakness do I refuse seeing? Could Samson struggle self-awareness deeply? Likely, and perhaps this becomes tragedy, because unexamined strengths become dangerous. The charismatic person manipulating, the successful person becoming arrogant, the talented person sabotaging life, the gifted person avoiding emotional growth. Could Samson repeatedly believe strength protected him from consequences? Almost certainly. This still happens constantly. People surviving consequences repeatedly begin believing, nothing bad happens to me. He can't handle it. I am different. Psychologists call this invulnerability illusion. Repeated success distorts reality. Could Samson quietly believe, he will always recover somehow? Likely, many gifted people secretly do, until consequences finally arrive. Still, perhaps deeper lesson lives inside loneliness. Pause there again, because strength often isolates people. People admire strong people, depend on strong people, need strong people. But truly seeing strong people, that feels rarer. Could Samson secretly ache for connection, understanding, love beyond strength? Maybe deeply. Psychologists increasingly understand unmet emotional needs create dangerous vulnerabilities, especially in gifted people, especially in lonely people. People start chasing relief instead of wisdom, attention, validation, desire. Relationships obviously unhealthy. Why? Because emotional hunger feels louder than caution. Could Samson mistake longing for love repeatedly? Likely. Many adults painfully understand this too. The relationship clearly dangerous, yet impossible to leave, because loneliness feels unbearable. This matters enormously, because wisdom often means asking harder questions. Not, what do I want? But, what is healthy? Not, what feels good today? But, what protects future me? Could Samson pause long enough for these questions? Rarely. And perhaps this becomes warning for everyone, because wisdom rarely feels exciting. Wisdom feels slower, less dramatic. Boundaries, reflection, listening to uncomfortable truth. Many people avoid wisdom because wisdom interrupts desire. Psychologists increasingly recognize something painful. Humans naturally justify what they emotionally want, even dangerous things, especially lonely humans, especially impulsive humans. Could Samson repeatedly rationalize obvious danger? Absolutely. Still, let us remain compassionate, because perhaps Samson was not arrogant monster, just human, gifted, lonely, emotionally vulnerable, trying to satisfy deeper needs through things never designed healing them. This feels deeply modern. The person using success to numb insecurity, the relationship replacing loneliness temporarily, the addiction quieting, pain briefly. Humans often reach for strength when wisdom needed more, and perhaps nowhere feels sadder than this truth. Samson lost vision only after refusing to see clearly for too long. Pause there. Literal blindness, yet symbolic too. Could humans become emotionally blind slowly? Absolutely. Ignoring patterns, ignoring red flags, ignoring inner wounds, ignoring people telling hard truth. This still happens everywhere. The friend warning repeatedly, family concerned repeatedly, the quiet voice whispering, something is not right. and humans saying, "I'm fine," until consequences force clarity. Still, perhaps Samson's story refuses ending only in tragedy, because something meaningful survives: humility. Pause there. Brokenness often teaches what success hides. Psychologists increasingly emphasize this paradox. Failure sometimes creates self-awareness. Success never could. Pain slowing people down. Consequences revealing patterns. Could Samson finally understand weakness through collapse? Perhaps. Could brokenness create wisdom? Strength never did. Possibly. This matters deeply for modern people, because many secretly fear mistakes mean ending. The divorce, the addiction, the failure, the lost years, the shame. People whispering, "Maybe I ruined everything." Yet Samson quietly suggests something painful but hopeful. Consequences hurt. Failure costs. But collapse sometimes reveals truths, success concealed. Still, the lesson remains. Strength without wisdom becomes dangerous. Talent without character becomes fragile. Power without humility becomes destructive. Could strongest people secretly need wisdom most? Perhaps. Because powerful people can harm themselves further before consequences arrive. This feels hauntingly relevant today. Influencers collapsing publicly. Leaders sabotaging careers. Celebrities losing themselves. Successful people privately miserable. People asking, how did someone so strong lose everything? Perhaps because strength solved many problems, but wisdom was missing. And perhaps Samson leaves humanity one final haunting question. What strength are you trusting most, while quietly neglecting the wisdom needed to protect it? Because sometimes the most dangerous weakness is not visible weakness. Sometimes, the most dangerous weakness feels exactly like strength nobody ever learned how to guide.